You're wasting your life on that old dump, Alex. Elena once sighed, a mechanic tied to a fading garage, blind to the mess one sail would spark. That sunny noon, he shook hands with Robert, a slick new owner with big plans, his gut twisting with doubt. Months later, shady vans crept into town, their engines growling secrets that threatened everything he... Hello everyone. Welcome to Narrative Whispers. Today I'm going to tell you another heartwarming story, so let's dive into it. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Carson's Auto Repair, casting long streaks of light across the concrete floor. Alex Mercer wiped his oil-stained hands on a rag that had seen better days and surveyed the garage he had called home for nearly 20 years. The familiar scent of motor oil, rubber, and the faint metallic tang that permeated every corner of the space had become as natural to him as breathing. At 45, the lines around his eyes had deepened, partly from age but mostly from years of squinting at engine components and deciphering the mechanical mysteries that customers brought to him day after day. "Morning, Mrs. Dunham," Alex called out as an elderly woman in a powder blue sweater pushed open the door, the bell above it announcing her arrival with a cheerful jingle. "How's that Buick treating you?" The smile that spread across his face was genuine, the kind that reached his eyes and created little crinkles at the corners. Mrs. Dunham had been bringing her car to Carson's since before Alex had started working there, and he had personally overseen every oil change, tire rotation, and repair the vehicle had needed over the past 2 decades. Mrs. Dunham clutched her purse to her chest and returned the smile with equal warmth. "Oh, you know how it is, Alex. That old girl keeps humming along, thanks to you. Though she's making a bit of a rattle when I take her above 40. She mimicked the sound with surprising accuracy, her hands gesturing to emphasize the point. "Thomas would have fixed it himself if he were still with us, God rest his soul, but these old hands aren't what they used to be." Alex nodded sympathetically, already mentally diagnosing the potential issues. "Let me take a look at her. Why don't you head over to Maggie's diner while you wait? I'll give you a call when I figure out what's going on." He reached for the keys. Mrs. Dunham was already extending toward him, a routine they had perfected over years of trust and reliability. This was what Alex valued most about his job, not just fixing cars, but being a steady presence in his customers' lives, a fixture they could depend on when the mechanical aspects of their world faltered. The rest of the morning passed in a comfortable rhythm of diagnostic checks, parts replacements, and the steady stream of regular customers who stopped by not just for repairs but often for a quick chat or advice. By lunchtime, Alex had identified the loose heat shield causing Mrs. Dunham's rattle, replaced a faulty alternator in Mr. Peterson's pickup truck, and scheduled 3 oil changes for later in the week. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a smudge of grease that he didn't notice, and decided to take his lunch break in the small office at the back of the garage. As Alex settled into the worn leather chair behind the desk, unwrapping the sandwich his wife, Elena, had packed for him that morning, the phone rang. He sighed, setting down his lunch and reaching for the receiver. "Carson's Auto Repair, this is Alex speaking," he answered, his voice carrying the practiced professionalism that came from years of handling customer calls. The voice on the other end belonged to Frank Carson, the owner of the garage and a man Alex had come to regard as more of a father figure than an employer over the years. "Alex, my boy." Frank's gravelly voice came through the line, carrying a weight that immediately set Alex on edge. "Got a minute to talk?" There was something in the older man's tone that suggested this wasn't going to be their usual check-in call, and Alex felt a knot forming in his stomach. Frank had been spending less and less time at the garage lately, citing health concerns, but Alex had suspected there was more to the story than just Frank's arthritis acting up. Pushing his sandwich aside, appetite suddenly diminished, Alex leaned forward in his chair. "Of course, Frank. Everything all right? How's the fishing trip going?" He tried to keep his tone light, hoping that his instincts were wrong, that this was just Frank calling to share a story about the monster bass that got away. But the heavy sigh that came through the phone line crushed that hope before it could fully form. "Fishing's fine, but that's not why I'm calling," Frank replied, his voice softening. "I've been meaning to tell you this face to face, but I just couldn't find the right moment. The thing is, Alex, I've sold the garage." The words hung in the air between them, even across the phone line, and Alex felt as though the oxygen had been sucked out of the small office. "New owner's name is Robert Keller. He's taking over at the end of the month. I wanted you to hear it from me first," before the paperwork comes through and it becomes official. Alex sat in stunned silence, the implications of Frank's announcement washing over him like a wave of cold water. The garage sold? After all these years? Frank had always talked about passing the business on to his son, Michael. But Michael had pursued a career in finance instead, showing little interest in taking over the family business. Still, Alex had never imagined Frank would sell to an outsider, someone who knew nothing about the history of Carson's, the relationships they had built with the community. I know it's a shock, Frank continued when Alex didn't immediately respond. But my doctor's been on my case about stress, and my retirement fund took a hit with the market downturn last year. This Keller fellow made a good offer, and he seems decent enough. Said he'd keep all the current staff on. There was a pause, and when Frank spoke again, his voice had the slightest tremor. I made sure to put in a good word for you, Alex. Told him you're the heart and soul of that place. That the customers come back because of you. Finding his voice at last, Alex swallowed the lump in his throat. I appreciate that, Frank. I really do. It's going to take some getting used to, that's all. He tried to inject a note of understanding into his tone, recognizing that this couldn't have been an easy decision for Frank to make. The garage had been in the Carson family for 3 generations. Selling it must have felt like severing a limb. When do I get to meet this Robert Keller? Frank's relief at Alex's measured response was palpable. He's coming by next Tuesday to look around, get a feel for the operation. I think you'll like him, Alex. He's got some business background. Wants to expand the garage's services. Could be good for everyone. The optimism in Frank's voice sounded forced, even to Alex, who wanted to believe the best. Anyway, I should let you get back to work. We'll talk more when I get back from this trip, alright? And Alex, thank you for understanding. As the call ended, Alex sat motionless, the half-eaten sandwich forgotten on the desk before him. The news had knocked the wind out of him, leaving him adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Carson's Auto Repair had been his second home, the place where he had honed his skills from a rookie mechanic fresh out of trade school to the respected head technician he was today. The thought of someone new coming in, potentially changing everything he had come to value about the garage, sent a chill down his spine. The following Tuesday arrived with an unusual sense of trepidation. Alex had spent the weekend processing the news, discussing it with Elena over dinner, trying to envision what changes might come with new ownership. Elena, ever the optimist, had pointed out that change wasn't necessarily bad, that perhaps this Robert Keller would bring fresh ideas and opportunities. But as Alex pulled into the garage parking lot and spotted the gleaming black BMW parked in Frank's usual spot, a vehicle that screamed corporate success rather than automotive understanding, he couldn't shake the feeling that life at Carson's was about to change in ways he might not appreciate. Robert Keller stood in the center of the garage, a man in his late 30s dressed in a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows in what seemed like a calculated attempt to appear casual and approachable. His polished leather shoes, however, were entirely impractical for a working garage, and the expensive watch on his wrist caught the light as he gestured while speaking to Frank. Frank spotted Alex and waved him over, a forced smile plastered on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. Alex! There you are. I want you to meet Robert Keller, the new owner of Carson's, Frank announced, clapping a hand on Alex's shoulder. Robert, this is Alex Mercer, the best damn mechanic in the county and the man who's kept this place running like clockwork for nearly 2 decades. The pride in Frank's voice was evident, and Alex felt a surge of gratitude toward the older man for the recognition. Robert Keller extended a hand, his grip firm but his palms smooth, unmarked by the calluses that characterized the hands of those who worked with tools for a living. Alex, pleasure to meet you. Frank has sung your praises nonstop since we started negotiations. I'm looking forward to working with you and learning from your expertise. His smile was practiced, the kind Alex had seen on salesmen and politicians. Professional, but not necessarily sincere. Shaking Robert's hand, Alex nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Nice to meet you, Mr. Keller. Frank mentioned you have plans for the garage? He figured it was best to get straight to the point, to understand what kind of changes were on the horizon. The sooner he knew what he was dealing with, the better he could prepare himself and the rest of the team. A spark of enthusiasm lit up Robert's eyes. Please call me Robert. And yes, I have some exciting ideas for expanding our services and increasing profitability. I've been studying the local market, and there's untapped potential here. With a few strategic investments and efficiency improvements, we could significantly boost revenue. He launched into a detailed explanation of his vision, throwing around terms like market penetration, service diversification, and profit margins. Words that felt jarringly out of place in the honest, straightforward environment of Carson's Auto Repair. As Robert continued his business-oriented monologue, Alex's heart sank. Not once did the new owner mention the quality of service, the relationships with long-standing customers, or the reputation the garage had built over decades of honest work. Instead, his focus seemed entirely on the bottom line, on turning Carson's into a more profitable enterprise without regard for the community aspect that had been its foundation. The transition of ownership was completed by the end of the month. As Frank had said, a small farewell gathering was held for Frank at Maggie's Diner, where customers and employees alike shared stories and expressed their gratitude for his years of service to the community. Frank, for his part, seemed both relieved and melancholic, a man caught between the freedom of retirement and the bittersweet reality of leaving behind a legacy. As the evening wound down, he pulled Alex aside, his weathered hand gripping Alex's arm with surprising strength. "You'll look out for the place, won't you, Alex?" Frank asked, his voice low, eyes searching Alex's face for reassurance. "Make sure the spirit of it stays alive, even if the name on the paperwork has changed?" There was an undercurrent of concern in his question, a tacit acknowledgement that perhaps he had made a mistake in his choice of successor. Alex nodded, though the promise felt heavy on his shoulders. "I'll do my best, Frank. You know I care about this place as much as you do." It wasn't a lie. But even as he spoke the words, Alex wondered how much influence he would actually have under Robert's leadership. From what he had seen so far, Robert Keller was a man with his own vision, and it didn't seem to align with the values that had guided Carson's for generations. The changes began almost immediately after Frank's departure. Robert wasted no time implementing his efficiency improvements, starting with a new computerized scheduling system that, while theoretically more organized, lacked the personal touch of the old appointment book where Alex had jotted down not just service details but also notes about customers' preferences and the quirks of their vehicles. The familiar paper invoices were replaced with sleek digital receipts that, while more professional looking, didn't allow for the handwritten notes and explanations that Alex had always included to ensure customers understood the work that had been done. Most concerning to Alex was the new pricing strategy that Robert introduced. Suddenly, there were different service tiers with varying price points. Economy, standard, and premium. Options that seemed designed to upsell customers rather than provide them with the specific services their vehicles actually needed. Additionally, Robert began pushing the mechanics to complete jobs more quickly, implementing a bonus system for those who could beat the book time for various repairs. While meant to incentivize efficiency, Alex worried it would lead to rushed work and potential oversights. One Tuesday afternoon, about 2 months after Robert had taken over, Alex found himself facing a dilemma that crystallized his growing discomfort with the new direction of the garage. Mrs. Dunham had brought her Buick in for what should have been a routine service, but Alex had discovered a problem with the brake lines that needed immediate attention. Under Frank's ownership, Alex would have simply fixed the issue, charging a fair price for parts and labor. But Robert's new policies required him to present Mrs. Dunham with a detailed estimate for the additional work, broken down into those tiered service options. "Mrs. Dunham, I found an issue with your brake lines that needs to be addressed," Alex explained as gently as possible, aware of the fixed income the elderly woman lived on. "It's a safety concern, so I wouldn't recommend driving the car until it's fixed." He handed her the tablet with the estimate, watching as her eyes widened at the figures on the screen. "But Alex, this is nearly twice what I paid last time there was a problem with the brakes," Mrs. Dunham protested, her voice quavering slightly. "Frank always gave me a fair price, said he wouldn't charge me an arm and a leg just because I don't know a carburetor from a catalytic converter." She looked up at him with confusion and a hint of betrayal that cut Alex to the quick. Before Alex could respond, Robert appeared beside them, having overheard the conversation from his new glass-walled office. "Mrs. Dunham, is it? I'm Robert Keller, the new owner." He introduced himself with that same practiced smile. "I understand you're concerned about the pricing, but I assure you, our rates are competitive with the market standard. We've actually streamlined our operations to provide more value to our customers." He launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about the benefits of their new service model, completely missing the distress on Mrs. Dunham's face. Alex stood by, a knot forming in his stomach as he watched the interaction unfold. When Mrs. Dunham asked if there was any way to reduce the cost, Robert suggested the economy option, which would address the immediate safety concern but skip several preventative measures that Alex knew would save Mrs. Dunham money in the long run. It was technically not dishonest, but it felt fundamentally wrong to Alex, a betrayal of the relationship of trust he had built with her over years of honest service. That evening, as Alex locked up the garage, the weight of the day's events pressed down on him like a physical burden. He had ultimately convinced Robert to allow him to do the full brake service for Mrs. Dunham at a reduced rate, arguing that it was an investment in customer loyalty. Robert had reluctantly agreed, but not without making it clear that such exceptions wouldn't be the norm moving forward. As Alex walked to his truck, he caught sight of his reflection in the window of the garage, the new Keller Automotive sign illuminated above his head where Carson's Auto Repair had once been. The sight stirred a deep unease within him, a growing certainty that he was becoming a part of something he no longer believed in. The following weeks saw more changes that further eroded Alex's connection to the job he had once loved. Robert brought in 2 new mechanics from a chain repair shop, young men who were quick but careless, more concerned with meeting time quotas than ensuring quality work. The personal touches that had defined Carson's, the courtesy calls to check in on how a car was running after a major repair, the small discounts for loyal customers, the willingness to spend extra time diagnosing unusual problems, were gradually phased out in favor of standardized processes designed to maximize throughput and profit. The breaking point came 3 months after Robert had taken over. Alex arrived at work to find a new laminated sign hanging in the customer waiting area, advertising a spring special on brake services. The fine print, which Alex had to squint to read, revealed that the special price applied only to the most basic service, with a long list of potential, necessary additions that would be identified during inspection. It was, essentially, a bait-and-switch tactic, designed to get customers in the door with the promise of savings only to upsell them once their cars were already on the lift. Alex stared at the sign, a cold anger building inside him. This wasn't just a change in business strategy. It was a fundamental betrayal of everything he believed in, everything that Carson's Auto Repair had stood for. Making a sudden decision, he marched directly to Robert's office, knocking once before pushing the door open without waiting for a response. Robert looked up from his computer, surprise evident on his face. "Alex? What can I do for you?" he asked, clearly taken aback by the mechanic's abrupt entrance. "We need to talk about that new promotion," Alex said, his voice steady despite the emotion churning inside him, "and about the direction this garage is heading." He closed the door behind him, determined to have this conversation in private, to give Robert one last chance to understand what he was destroying. For the next half hour, Alex laid out his concerns, trying to make Robert see that the short-term profits he was chasing would ultimately lead to the loss of the loyal customer base that had sustained the garage for generations. He explained the value of trust in their line of work, how people came to Carson's not just because they needed their cars fixed, but because they knew they would be treated fairly and honestly. "What you're building here might make money for a while," Alex concluded, "but it won't last, and I can't be part of it." Robert had listened with a calm that gradually gave way to defensive irritation. "Times change, Alex," he countered, leaning back in his chair. "Frank's way of doing business was admirable, but it's not sustainable in today's market. We need to be competitive, aggressive even. The customers will adapt." He gestured to the spreadsheet open on his computer screen. "The numbers don't lie. We're already seeing increased revenue compared to last quarter." Alex shook his head, realizing that Robert was too entrenched in his bottom-line mentality to grasp what was truly at stake. "Then I guess this is where we part ways," he said quietly, the decision crystallizing in his mind even as the words left his mouth. "I've given my best years to this garage because I believed in what we were doing here. I can't stay and watch it become something I don't recognize." He extended his hand, a formal gesture to conclude what had become an increasingly formal relationship. "I'll finish out the week to make sure my current projects are wrapped up, but then I'm done." A flash of surprise crossed Robert's face, quickly replaced by a calculated neutrality. "I'm sorry to hear that, Alex. You're a valuable asset to the team." He shook Alex's hand, his grip firm but his eyes already darting back to his computer screen. "I'll have HR prepare your final paperwork." The dismissal was clear, and Alex felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief as he turned to leave the office. 20 years of his life ended in a brief conversation with a man who valued spreadsheets over human connections. Word of Alex's departure spread quickly through the tight-knit community of regular customers. By the end of his final week, the garage had been inundated with visits from people who came not for repairs but to express their dismay and to ask where they could find him next. Alex was touched by the outpouring of support, by the cards and small gifts, by Mrs. Dunham's teary-eyed promise to follow him wherever he ended up working. It confirmed what he had always known but struggled to articulate to Robert, that the true value of Carson's auto repair had never been in its profit margins, but in the trust and relationships it had cultivated. As Alex cleaned out his toolbox on his final day, carefully wrapping each tool that had become an extension of his hands over the years, he felt a strange sense of peace mingled with the uncertainty of what would come next. Elena had been supportive of his decision, assuring him that with his skills and reputation, he wouldn't be unemployed for long. Still, the prospect of starting over at 45 was daunting, especially given his deep attachment to the garage that had been his professional home for so long. Robert made a brief appearance as Alex was loading the last of his belongings into his truck, maintaining the polite facade that had characterized their interactions since their confrontation. "Best of luck, Alex," he offered, extending his hand for a final handshake. "If you ever change your mind, there's always a place for you here." The offer sounded hollow, a formality rather than a genuine desire to have Alex return. With a final nod to the garage that had shaped so much of his adult life, Alex drove away, the Keller Automotive sign shrinking in his rearview mirror. He felt a pang of guilt, remembering his promise to Frank to look after the place, to preserve its spirit. But some battles couldn't be won, and sometimes the most principled choice was to walk away rather than compromise on fundamental values. The weeks following Alex's departure were a time of transition and unexpected opportunity. Word of his availability spread through the local automotive community, and he received several job offers from competing garages eager to capitalize on his reputation. But it was a call from James Thompson, the service manager at Summit Automotive, a respected dealership known for its customer service and technical excellence, that caught Alex's attention. James didn't just offer him a job. He offered him a position as lead technician with the autonomy to build his own team and maintain the standards of quality he had always valued. "We've heard great things about you, Alex," James had said during their meeting. "Our philosophy aligns with what I understand was the original spirit of Carson's: honest work, fair pricing, and treating customers like part of the family. We'd be honored to have you bring that approach to our service department." The sincerity in James's voice had resonated with Alex, reminding him of Frank's mentorship and the values that had drawn him to automotive work in the first place. Taking the position at Summit proved to be a wise decision. The dealership's resources and commitment to quality allowed Alex to thrive, implementing best practices he had developed over his career while learning new techniques and technologies from their state-of-the-art facility. Many of his loyal customers from Carson's followed him to Summit, grateful to continue their relationship with a mechanic they trusted. Within months, the service department under Alex's leadership saw a significant increase in customer satisfaction ratings and repeat business. Meanwhile, back at what was now firmly established as Keller Automotive, the effects of Alex's departure and Robert's business approach were becoming increasingly apparent. Without Alex's steady hand and dedication to quality, customer complaints began to rise. The new mechanics, incentivized to work quickly rather than thoroughly, missed issues that would have been caught under more careful inspection. The bait-and-switch pricing strategies initially attracted new customers but failed to retain them once they experienced the actual service. 6 months after Alex had left, Elena came home one evening with a surprising piece of local news. "I ran into Sarah from the bank today," she mentioned as they prepared dinner together, a nightly ritual that had become even more precious since Alex's career change had given him more regular hours. "She said Robert Keller was asking about loans to keep the garage afloat. Apparently business has dropped off significantly." Alex paused in chopping vegetables, absorbing this information with a complex mixture of emotions. On one hand, there was a certain vindication in knowing that his predictions about the unsustainability of Robert's approach had proven accurate. On the other hand, he felt a genuine sadness for the decline of a business that had meant so much to him and to the community. "That's a shame," he said finally, returning to his task. The garage deserved better. What Alex didn't anticipate was the call he would receive a week later from Robert himself. The conversation began awkwardly, with Robert's voice carrying none of the confident swagger that had characterized their previous interactions. "Alex, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he started, an uncharacteristic hesitancy in his tone. "I was wondering if you might be willing to meet for coffee. There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Curiosity overcame Alex's initial instinct to decline. "All right," he agreed, suggesting a time and place for the meeting. As he hung up the phone, he couldn't help but wonder what had prompted this unexpected outreach from a man who had seemed so certain of his path just months ago. The Robert Keller who sat across from Alex at Maggie's diner the following afternoon bore little resemblance to the confident businessman who had taken over Carson's auto repair. His shoulders were slumped, the bags under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights, and his usually immaculate appearance showed signs of neglect. He fidgeted with his coffee cup, seemingly struggling to find the right words to begin the conversation. "I made a mistake, Alex," Robert finally admitted, his voice low and tinged with regret. "Several mistakes, actually." He took a sip of his coffee, using the moment to gather his thoughts. "I thought I knew better, that I could apply the same business principles that had worked in other industries to the garage. But I was wrong. The community doesn't want what I'm selling. They want what Carson's used to offer under Frank's ownership, and under your leadership." Alex listened in silence, surprised by Robert's candor and the humility that had replaced his previous arrogance. It was clear that the past months had been a difficult education for the ambitious businessman, one that had forced him to reconsider his approach and his values. "The garage is in trouble," Robert continued, meeting Alex's gaze directly for the first time since they had sat down. "Customer numbers are down, reviews are terrible, and I'm hemorrhaging money trying to keep the place open. I've tried hiring new mechanics, running promotions, even bringing in consultants, but nothing's working." He paused, drawing a deep breath before coming to the point of the meeting. "I want to offer you a partnership, Alex. Equal ownership, equal say in how the garage is run. We'll change the name back to Carson's, with Frank's blessing, and return to the principles that made it successful in the first place." The proposal caught Alex completely off guard. A partnership? With Robert Keller? The idea seemed absurd on its face, given their history and fundamentally different approaches to business. And yet, as he studied Robert's expression, Alex saw something that gave him pause, genuine regret, and a willingness to learn from his mistakes. "Why me?" he asked simply. "Why not sell the garage and move on to something more in line with your usual business model?" Robert's response was surprisingly reflective. "Because I've realized that not everything should be about maximizing profit. There's value in being part of a community, in building something sustainable rather than just extracting as much money as possible in the short term." He smiled ruefully. "Plus, my pride's at stake now. I can't let my first solo venture fail so spectacularly. I'd rather make it a success, even if that means sharing control and rethinking my approach." Alex sat back, considering the offer. His position at Summit was secure and satisfying, but there was something compelling about the opportunity to return to Carson's, to reclaim and preserve the legacy that had meant so much to him. And if Robert was genuinely committed to changing his approach, perhaps they could create something that combined the best of both worlds: Robert's business acumen and Alex's technical expertise and community connections. "I need complete autonomy over the service department," Alex stated, beginning to lay out his conditions. "Quality of work would never be compromised for speed or profit. We'd return to transparent, straightforward pricing. And we need to rebuild relationships with the customers who were driven away by the changes you implemented." He was surprised by his own response, the implicit acceptance of Robert's proposal buried within his list of requirements. Robert's expression brightened, a glimmer of his old confidence returning but tempered now with something new: respect. "Agreed on all counts," he said eagerly. "And I'd handle the business side, accounting, marketing, expansion opportunities. But with your input and approval, equal partners, making decisions together." He extended his hand across the table, an echo of their first meeting but with a sincerity that had been absent before. "What do you say, Alex? Partners?" After a moment's hesitation, Alex shook Robert's hand, sealing an unlikely alliance that would reshape both their futures. "Partners," he confirmed, already mentally listing the changes they would need to make, the relationships they would need to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy, but the challenge of restoring Carson's to its former glory, of preserving its legacy while moving it forward, was one he found himself unexpectedly eager to embrace. The transformation of Keller Automotive back into Carson's Auto Repair, now officially Carson's Automotive Services, to reflect the partnership's blended vision, began with a community open house. Robert and Alex stood side by side, welcoming former customers and curious locals alike, explaining their new partnership and the renewed commitment to quality service and fair pricing. Frank Carson himself made an appearance, his weathered face breaking into a wide smile as he saw the familiar Carson's sign reinstalled above the entrance, a tangible symbol of the garage's return to its roots. "You did it, my boy," Frank murmured to Alex as they shared a quiet moment amidst the bustle of the open house. "You kept your promise after all." The pride in the older man's eyes brought a lump to Alex's throat, a tangible reminder of why he had made the decision to return, to partner with a man who had once represented everything he opposed. The months that followed were a testament to the power of combining complementary strengths and shared values. Under Alex's guidance, the service department returned to its former standards of excellence, with thorough diagnostics, quality repairs, and the personal touches that had built Carson's reputation over decades. Robert, meanwhile, applied his business acumen in more constructive ways, implementing a more efficient inventory system, developing a user-friendly website that maintained the personal touch of the business, and exploring sustainable expansion opportunities that aligned with their shared vision. Most significantly, the partnership between Alex and Robert evolved from a pragmatic business arrangement into a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared goals. Robert, humbled by his earlier failure and impressed by Alex's expertise and integrity, began to absorb the values that had made Carson special in the first place. Alex, in turn, gained an appreciation for Robert's strategic thinking and innovative ideas once they were untethered from pure profit motives. 1 year after their unlikely partnership began, Carson's Automotive Services had not only reclaimed its former customer base but had expanded its reach, becoming a model for how traditional service values could coexist with modern business practices. The garage was profitable, but more importantly, it was fulfilling its original mission of being a trusted community resource, a place where people knew they would be treated fairly and their vehicles would be cared for properly. As Alex and Robert locked up the garage one evening after a particularly busy day, they paused to admire the warm glow of the Carson's sign against the darkening sky. "You know," Robert reflected, his voice carrying the contentment of a man who had found his place, "when I first bought this place, I thought I was just acquiring a business. I had no idea I was actually joining a legacy." He glanced at Alex, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you for showing me the difference." Alex nodded, understanding the journey Robert had undertaken, from seeing the garage as merely a profit center to recognizing it as a vital part of the community fabric. "And thank you for being willing to learn," he responded, the words simple but weighted with the significance of their shared transformation. "Not everyone would have had the humility to change course the way you did." As they turned to walk toward their respective vehicles, the partners and friends shared a comfortable silence, each contemplating the unexpected path that had brought them to this point. The garage behind them stood as a testament to the possibility of reconciling different values and approaches, of finding common ground even after conflict, and of building something stronger and more resilient through partnership than either could have created alone. In the end, Carson's Auto Repair wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about maintaining connections, honoring traditions while embracing change, and recognizing that true success came not from the bottom line but from the trust and relationships built over years of honest service. Thank you for listening to this story. If you like it, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story of Narrative Whispers.